In this track season, I have made a decent number of prediction videos where I try and weigh up who is most likely to win some of the biggest races of the year. This mostly centered around the 1500 meters, but there was also a 5000 meter prediction in there too. Whilst these videos have been fun to make and have generated a lot of discussion, there is something I don't like to admit. I've got most of my predictions wrong. Now of course this does not mean that I'm completely useless. For instance, I predicted Jakob Ingebrigtsen comfortably winning the Olympic 5000 meters and not winning the 1500 meters due to pacing issues. But Ingebrigtsen has always done well in the 5000 meters, and many have pointed out his lack of success in non-paced 1500 meter races, as exhibited at the World Championships. And as a result, him winning gold in the 5k and losing the 15 were not huge surprises to many people. And some of the mistakes I've made have been pretty bad. Cole Hocker not even being mentioned in my Olympic 1500 meter prediction, and my ruling out of Cheptegei in the Olympics are two pretty egregious examples. But I still maintain that my predictions were based on sound reasoning, even if they turned out to be wrong. So this leads me to the question, why is track and field so difficult to predict? There are a huge amount of factors involved in the outcome of a race, especially when talking about distances that are as chaotic and competitive as the 1500 meters. And because many of the top athletes are very similar in fitness, the outcome of a race comes down to very small or technical factors that would completely change the results if not present. And I'm going to outline 5 of these factors and give you examples from my prediction videos as to how these variables affected the outcome of a race. Reason number 1. Styles make races. For those new to track, you may think that races come down to who is the fittest athlete, and whilst this is a huge factor, it's not that simple. How each athlete matches up stylistically against one another can play a huge role. For example, some athletes are well suited to a sit and kick race, where the first 80% of the race is very slow, but the last 20% is incredibly fast. 2023 world champion in the 1500 meters Josh Kerr and Olympic 1500 meter champion Cole Hocker both fall into this category nicely, as both have solid 800 meter times and can close their races very quickly. For example, Cole Hocker closed the last 300 meters of the Paris 2024 Olympic final with a 39.65, going from 5th place to 1st place. Another example is when Josh Kerr closed his final 200 meters to become the 2024 World Indoor Champion in the 3000 meters with a blistering 25.19 second time. On the flip side, some athletes suit a consistent fast pace throughout the race, but struggle in more tactical sit and kick races. Of course, Norway's Jakob Ingebrigtsen is the perfect example, as he loves to front run, wind up the pace in his competition, and watch them drop like flies. If you look at the splits of most of his races, they tend to be at a robotically consistent pace, with a slight wind up as the race continues. But despite having a personal best almost a second faster than Kerr and Hocker, he is still being outkicked by them in the Olympic final, among a few other races. Then you have certain athletes who are sort of a mixture of both styles, such as Yared Nuguse, who is a natural front runner but still has the ability to finish pretty strong. You could even argue that Hocker and Kerr suit this category nicely, given that they are still able to be in top contention in super fast races, the Olympics being one of them. These different styles often clash in races, with the front runners doing their best to set a fast pace that will leave their competition in the dust. Conversely, tactical racers either try and hold on or ensure the pace of race starts out so slow that they can speed past their competition in the last lap. Whether a race has paces in it can massively impact this. If the race does have pacers who keep the tempo fast and consistent, such as in Diamond League meets, then that suits the front runners as they will be the only ones able to keep up with the fast pace. But if the race does not have paces, such as in the Olympics or World Championships, then this suits the tactical kickers of the running world, as the pace is more likely to be slower, allowing them to outkick the field in the last lap. This is why I and many others did not pick Ingebrigtsen to win the 1500 meter Olympic final, and despite performing excellently in paced races, he has a history of missing out on the top spot in non-paced races. But just because a certain style of race is on average better suited to a certain athlete, it does not mean they will necessarily win, because other factors can be at play. For instance, Josh Kerr was able to beat Jakob Ingebrigtsen in the Prefontaine Classic in 2024 after overtaking him with 400 meters to go. Although this race had paces and pace lights and would therefore on paper put the Norwegian as the favourite, Kerr was in better shape in large part because Jakob Ingebrigtsen was recovering from an Achilles injury a few months earlier, which meant he wasn't in full form going into this race. And this brings me nicely on to my second point. Reason 2. Form and fitness matter. A vital factor that needs to be considered in racing is that there are so many individual internal things that affect an athlete's performance, oftentimes severely. For example, illness, injury, or poor preparation for an event can completely derail an athlete's chances of winning a race meet, and can bring an athlete from world record shape to subpar form in a matter of days. The Zurich Diamond League is an excellent example of this. Ingebrigtsen excels in Diamond Leagues as they are paced, and had just come off a staggering 3000 meter world record in Silesia 2 weeks ago. On paper, he was the heavy favourite for this race, but illness struck resulted in him getting a disappointing second place and a 3:30 finish, instead of the standard 3:27 we've come to expect from this man. Josh Kerr as well, whilst not a favourite to win, completely bombed this race, coming 5th place with a 3:31 time, when you would expect a podium finish from him at least. We knew Jakob was ill going into the Zurich Diamond League, and therefore may not perform as expected, but no one was thinking Kerr would perform as badly as he did. And this is because there are so many unknowns going into a race. We don't know if an athlete has had poor preparation, been poorly affected by the travel, or been feeling terrible in training. We also don't know if an athlete is ill or injured unless they tell us, which oftentimes is not going to happen until after the race because they don't want to let their opponents know that they're feeling weak. And it's also a convenient excuse after a bad performance. And to show you just how drastic of a change this can have in such a short space of time, Josh Kerr would return just 3 days after the disappointment in Zurich to win the New Balance 5th Avenue Mile with a rapid 3:44 time, albeit on a net downhill course. So what I want to impress upon you is that not only do these factors have a huge role, they can change an athlete's form within a matter of days. Beyond rogue factors such as illness or injury, form is hugely influenced by when an athlete peaks for a season. Because of the physical limits of the human body, elite athletes can only maintain peak performance for a few weeks or so, without risking injury, and thus typically time their peak for the biggest race meets of the year, such as the World Championships or the Olympics, which tend to happen mid to late summer. But we actually don't know if an athlete has timed their peak correctly in the season, because these kind of things are hard to know until the athlete just races. Ingebrigtsen has spoken about often not knowing whether he's fully fit or not, and basically figuring it out mid-race, such as when he did in the Lausanne Diamond League. In my 3000 meter prediction video, I guessed incorrectly that Jakob had peaked for the Olympics and was not in the shape to run a world record. Yeah, that turned out to be pretty wrong, Jesus Christ. And that was basically just an assumption I had made based roughly on the amount of time that had elapsed since the Olympics, and it ended up being pretty badly wrong. On the flip side, Cole Hocker peaked pretty damn hard for the Olympics and could barely get a sub 3:30 time in the post-Olympic Diamond League races after just running a 3:27 in the Olympic final. The large influence that an athlete's peak has on their performance, and the drastic difference as to when different athletes peak, makes it very difficult to know what form they will be in, potentially completely changing the outcome of a race. Imagine if Hocker had continued his peak and Jakob had been out of shape for Lausanne. We could see Hocker beat him a second time, but of course, it didn't happen. Essentially, there are so many unknowns when trying to predict an athlete's form going into the race, and these unknowns make it difficult to spot trends in athletes' current form during the season. If they were ill a week ago, we don't know if they effectively recovered. Was their recent good performance a one-off result, or a sign that the athlete has actually made significant improvement? Is a bad result just due to bad luck, or is it maybe a sign that the athlete peaked too early or has picked up an injury? These questions are virtually impossible to answer until race day, and when all of this is taken together, it further demonstrates why track is an incredibly difficult sport to predict. Reason 3. Highly competitive events. As important as all these other factors are, the effect is made worse by how close the competition is in something like the 1500 meters. In the past few years, we have seen a huge amount of talent emerge and mark themselves as genuine contenders on the world stage. Of course, you have Ingebrigtsen, Hocker, Kerr and Negus in the 1500 meter, which in itself is a lot of athletes whose form and race history you need to consider. But even in other events like the 5000 meter or the 10,000 meter, you have an abundance of talent, probably even more than the 1500. Cheptegei, Barrega, Kiplimo, Arigari, Fischer, Kujelcha, the list goes on and on and on. For some reference, the 10,000 meter featured 7 athletes who had run under 26:35 and 14 guys who had run sub 27 before. That's a lot of fast athletes. And when you have so many athletes who have a genuine chance of winning the entire race, especially if it ends up being tactical and comes down to anyone's race in a last lap burn-up, then you have to keep track of every athlete's form, race style and history in the event. And at a certain point, it's just not possible to compute all the variables. There were many races I decided to not even try and predict, because when I looked at all of the different athletes that could be medal contenders, I felt that even speculation was pointless, given how many races it could likely win. If you add the fact that many of the longer distances are raced much more rarely, and therefore we have a smaller sample size of data of the athletes to draw upon, then it's little wonder why the sport is so hard to predict. Now all of these things are factors that need to be considered before a race, but what about during the actual race itself? Reason number 4, random factors. There are many rogue incidents that can go wrong for an athlete on the day of or during a race, with one of the most lethal being falling. I don't think I need to explain why falling can eliminate an otherwise strong competitor's chance of winning, but unfortunately this issue is really common. Jared Negus got clipped in the Diamond League final and was unable to recover. Niels Laros fell in the London Diamond League. Josh Kerr and Elliot Giles collided and fell in the Olympic trials. With races becoming more and more crowded, it seems inevitable that at least one fall is going to happen. I mean, look at the chaos in the 5,000 meter heats during the Olympics. Even if an athlete recovers from the fall, it can take enough energy out of them that they fade in a race they would otherwise do well in. And this can happen to literally anyone, meaning that even in races where there is a strong favourite to win, one mistake can derail an entire athlete's chances, making this sport even more unpredictable. It's one of the reasons you see many of the favourites in certain races hang around the back during the heats, because they have the strength to be able to outkick the field in the final lap, and by sitting at the back of the pack, they're reducing their chances of being involved in any falls. Mother Nature also has a part to play and can significantly impact the outcome of a race. If the weather is hot and humid, the race is likely to be slow and tactical, since athletes do not want to risk tiring themselves out with a fast pace and are therefore more likely to keep the pace conservative, which can mean that a sit and kick style runner will benefit, as the race will more likely come down to a super fast last lap. If the weather is windy as well, that could go against athletes who like to front run, as they will be working against the full force of the wind whilst the competitors can safely draft behind them. And whilst we can get a rough idea as to what the weather will be a few days before the race, I don't think I need to let you know that the weather forecast is often inaccurate. And speaking of variety, reason number 5, tactical volatility. Finally, something that needs to be considered with the shorter distances is that these races are very fast. There are many split-second decisions that athletes need to take in the moment. Timing when you outkick someone, deciding whether to follow a leader or betting on them gassing out and you being able to overtake them in the end. This could say that athletes need to spend a lot of time thinking on their feet. I'll see myself out. Because these decisions need to be made in such quick time, they are often strategically wrong and have a notable influence on the end outcome of a race. For example, Yamal Sajati timed his lethal kick too late in the men's 800 meter Olympic final, resulting in him coming in a disappointing third place when he was arguably the favourite to win the final. Or Jakob Ingebrigtsen underestimating his fatigue levels in the Olympic 1500 meter final by pulling away from the pack midway through, which led to him gassing badly in the final 100 meters. And there are more subtle tactical mistakes an athlete can make, such as letting themselves getting boxed in a pack during the final lap and therefore being unable to make their move when necessary. Ultimately, often they need to rely on their gut, and this results in tactical errors that cause upsets. When all of these factors are taken together, the short answer is that there are so many variables that are involved in performing at the top level in distance running, and with many events being more competitive than ever, it makes the outcome of these races sometimes be a result of the smallest details. I do want to say as well that there have been many mistakes on my part or important factors I did not consider purely due to just forgetting. I hope this video doesn't come across like I'm trying to give you some insight as to why it is so hard to predict athletics. If you want to see a video about if Jakob Ingebrigtsen should transition to the 5,000 meters, then click on this video here. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.